Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we are going to start Unit 2, Approaches to Study Social Movements, Liberal, Gandhian and Marxism. And our current topic is Resource Mobilization Theory. Resource mobilization theory is an outcome of rational choice theory. It is based on the assumption that individuals' actions are motivated by goals that express their preferences. They act within the given constraints and available choices. It is not possible for all individuals to get all that they want. They must make choices within the available possibilities at a given point of time. Rational choice theory argues that the individuals must make a rational choice regarding what is the best for them in a situation and accordingly anticipate and calculate the outcome of their actions. Rational individuals choose the alternatives that is likely to give them the greatest satisfaction. Some of the proponents of this theory argue that the social movements for revolutionary changes by the marginal sections is out of impulse and emotion. Therefore, they do not sustain for long and fail. It was called resource mobilization theory because the theory purported to show that the success of a movement depended on the resources available to be used. These resources arose from inducting individuals to participate and contribute to the cost. Individuals participate because they see the benefits to be derived from joining. Success also depends on the movement being able to link to other networks of groups and organizations. The resource mobilization theory's stress was wholly on the strategy to make the movement succeed in demanding for a change in government policies or legislation. Thus, it is sometimes said that the theory focused on political action or the realm of politics rather than on civil society. Jenkins and Perrow argued that protest and movement formation only occurs when the necessary resources are pumped into it. According to them, struggles for powerless and poor groups only take place when rich benefactors take an interest in their struggle and pump resources into it. In the case of the farm workers, Jenkins and Perrow argue that their struggle only got going properly when middle class liberals in the 60s decided to champion their cause. Now, resource mobilization theory RMT reacts against the old view of social movement, for example, communalism and Nazism, as an irrational protest of the marginalized and as tending to extremism, and so illegitimate and not really political. RMT sees social movements, for example, black civil rights, environmentalism, as individually rational attempts to mobilize resources in pursuit of politics by other means, hence driven by people with resources embedded in stable network and so legitimate political actors. Resource mobilization theory tends to reproduce professional organizers' perspective. For example, Greenpeace, Amnesty, tackling the free rider problem to build strong and effective movements through organization and selective incentives for participation. The theory emphasizes entrepreneurial skill of the leaders of the movement. They mobilize resources, professional finances, moral support, and networking from within and outside to sustain their struggles. The leaders of the successful movements have skill to create organization and mobilize people. In the process, common goals are articulated and consensus is created so that all the participants accept the goal. Rajendra Singh summarizes the major assumptions of RMT. They are: social movements must be understood in terms of conflict model of collective action. There is no basic difference between institutional and non-institutional collective actions. Both institutional and non-institutional collective action contain conflicts of interest built in the system of institutionalized power relations. Social movements involve the rational pursuit of interest by competing groups. Goals and grievances, conflict and constellations are inherently present in all relations of power, and as such, they themselves cannot explain the formation of social movements. The formation of social movements, therefore, is determined by the changes in resources, organization, and opportunities for collective action. Success and effectiveness of collective action is understood in terms of material benefit or the actor being recognized as a political person. And finally, as Jenkins visualizes the mobilization of men in contemporary social movements involves the use of large-scale advanced communication techniques, bureaucratized organization, and utilitarian drives and initiatives. Now, the next theory is relative deprivation theory. The theory of relative deprivation, developed by American scholars Gurr 1970, has also guided some studies on agitation and mass movements. Relative deprivation is defined as actors' perception of discrepancy between their value expectations and their environmental apparent value capabilities. Value expectations are the goods and conditions of life to which people believe they are justifiably entitled. The referents of value capabilities are to be found largely in the social and physical environment. They are the conditions that determine people's perceived chances of getting or keeping the values they legitimately expect to attain. Gar writes, the frustration, aggression, and the related threat aggression mechanisms provide the basic motivational link between the relative deprivation and the potential for collective violence. Gar also links three other concepts to relative deprivation, namely dissonance, anomalies, and conflict. The second of these, anomy, is important in its effect to value opportunities. There are three models as to how the differentiation of value expectations and value capabilities has impact on relative deprivation. Decremental deprivation model describes the situation where the expectations are stable but capabilities declines. In aspirational model, the capabilities remain the same but the expectations increase. The last model, J curve or progressive deprivation model, fits to the situations when expectations and capabilities first increase hand in hand, but then capabilities stop to increase or decrease while expectations still go on. Those who perceive deprivation and as a result experience a feeling of frustration becomes aggressive. They are jealous of those who have more. They protest or revolt against those who have more. They do not deal with the resources of deprivation. For Gar, deprivation is primarily psychological. Therefore, he does not deal with the socio-economic structure which is the source of deprivation. If such sense of deprivation is confined to an individual against another individual, it leads to crime. When it becomes collective perception, deprivation of reason, community, or caste, it takes the form of collective action. But it is not accompanied with ideology for the social system. It remains a protest or rebellion and hardly takes a form of social movement. They become temporary aberration rather than an ongoing process of change. Relative deprivation is necessary but not a sufficient condition for protest movements. MSA Rao argues a sufficient level of understanding and reflection is required on the part of the participants, and they must be able to observe and perceive the contrast between the social and cultural conditions of the privileged and those of the deprived, and must realize that it is possible to do something about it. Now let us sum up the unit. Approach or theoretical framework help us to understand social movements in more meaningful way. They are useful to give meanings to the facts and also valuable guide to those who are active in movements. Among all, the most important approach is the Marxist perspective. It is also called classical approach or old approach. The list of approaches given above is not exhaustive. There are also approaches like behavioral, cognitive, multi-level, and so on, but they are not widely used by the scholars to study social movements. Within each approach, there are different shades or analyses. Here we want to today's lecture wind up, and we have come to the end of the unit. Thank you so much for your attention.